Good morning, Read 180 students. Today is Monday, April 20th, and we're going to continue to work on Workshop 3, Life in Dystopia. So you're going to need the copy of your real book and a pencil. And today you can see our learning target is I can identify setting, character, plot, and theme in a story. This first part, I just want to review with you. We did read the first part of the lottery last week, and it's been a few days. So let's go back and review so we can fill out the first section of analyzing literary elements on page 133, which will be your part of your assignment for today. So if you remember, Shirley Jackson wrote a story. It's called The Lottery. It is a short story. And it is really focusing on life in a village, and it is more of a dystopian fiction type of genre. Okay, so again, we're going to be looking at 4 elements of the literary elements or parts of the story, which is the setting, characters, plot, and theme. And remember, when we talk about a lottery, if you think about like a lottery ticket where there's prizes distributed to winners, and it's based on luck, not by choice. Okay, so let's review just part 1. Okay, and the next 2 slides actually has part 1, so you can go back and look at anything that you need to. But really, if we look at the setting, we know that it's taken place June 27th. We know the characters, there's not just one, there's several. It's the townspeople, and that they're gathering together. They're villagers or townspeople gathering together for this event. And we know that the lottery we know that Mr. Summers is the person with the box, and the townspeople are acting hesitant as Mr. Summers asks for volunteers for help. Now, what we're going to do on this next part, on page 133, I'm going to have you go back and look where it says Analyzing Literary Elements. Okay. We're going to, the first part you can see is filled in, but I'm going to have you do the next part where it says Characters and Plot. Okay. Now, we know that in the setting, we know that it's taking place in the summer. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's June 27th. The place is the village square. Now, if you think of a village square, that would be like a large area where people in the community or in the village can gather. That's kind of, sometimes in Thief River, you think about maybe like the park over by Taco John's. That could be a real gathering spot for like farmers markets and concerts that might be given. It's an area that people can gather and be together safely. And typically there's an event going on. Okay. So when we look at page 133, we're going to have you focus on the next part. And the next part says, what are the villagers like at the beginning of the story? So if you go back into the actual story, they talked about how the men and the women and children were all gathering together. Remember, the men were getting together and talking about things that were important to them, like the taxes, maybe some things that they've been doing. The women were back, together, and again, more just visiting and getting to know each other again, finding out what's been going on, almost a little bit like gossiping. And then the children, of course, were playing together, running around, having fun. And again, it's setting in June, so we kind of think of it like maybe they've been on summer break. Not in school, so it's a chance for them, if they haven't seen each other for a while, they're all back together, just kind of getting reacquainted with each other. So that might help fill out on page 133 what were the villagers doing at the beginning. Now remember, as you fill these in, please remember to be really thorough in your answers. again, I'm looking for complete sentences and I'm looking for details from the actual story. So you may have to pause this and go back and look for that in the pages that we read last week. Okay, the next thing is the plot. What happens at the beginning of the story? All right. So again, we know that the villagers or the townspeople are gathering together in the town square or in this village square. It is the annual event. It is the lottery. We know that the children are assembled first. And then they mentioned something about gathering stones, how the boys were gathering stones. And if we look, that would be probably back in one of the first pages that we read. So you may have to go back and look a little bit there for that answer. Okay, so what's happening at the beginning of the story? Now remember, each page I will grade. You will either get a 5, 3, or a 1, and then again, you can look back on a previous, what does that entail, okay, for grading. All right, so before we go on to read the second part, we do need to complete a couple of assignments or a couple of pages, and that's what we will be doing today. Now you'll see on this slide here, they've asked you to complete the academic vocabulary section on page 134. And you'll see off to the left, I do have the definition of the word tend, to do something regularly and in a particular way. What you will be doing is filling that in. Pause this recording if you need to. And then I want you to write your own example. I tend to what? What do you tend to do in your free time? I tend to blank in my free time. Go ahead and fill that in. Our second vocabulary word is select, and that means to choose an item from a group of things. So again, fill that academic vocabulary in, and then you're going to complete the example. What is one way to select a good book to read? And go ahead and you can complete that. We're going to move on to page 135. Now, what I'm going to have you do is we're going to reread paragraph 1. And that's talking about the setting, okay? Now, if you look at the key idea, what is happening on the morning of June 27th? So let's go back to page 134, and I'm just going to read paragraph 1. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny, with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely, which means in large amounts, and the grass was richly green. The people of the big village began to gather at the square, between the post office and the bank, around 10 o'clock. In some towns, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 26th. But in this village, where there was only about 300 people, the whole lottery took less than 2 hours. So it could begin at 10 o'clock in the morning and still be through in time to allow the villagers to get home for noon dinner. Okay, so as I read that and I try to analyze and picture in my brain what the setting is like, again, the author uses vivid imagery to describe that day of what's happening in the village square. So again, when I look for vivid imagery, I'm going to try to find those descriptions that the author is giving me when I'm reading, and then I can hopefully feel what the author is relating to. Okay. Now, what you're going to do is we're going to be looking at that, analyzing the setting. There's 2 parts. So let's look at the first part where it says analyzing setting. It says, what imagery does the author use to describe this setting? So please, you're going to go back to paragraph 1, the one that I just read, and you're going to find text evidence that supports what kind of description did the author use to help give us that picture of what's happening in the town square. Now I want you to look down in that little toolkit, the strategy toolkit. So again, as we read the lottery, you're going to notice the setting details that help you picture the town. So think about the expectations they set for readers. What might happen in such a place? Now, the last thing you're going to do on this page is I want you to complete the react and write. So you're going to go back into the text on page 135, and you're going to underline one detail in this part of the text that strikes you as unusual or strange. And then what did you underline and why? So again, you'll do your underlining, and then you're going to explain, I underlined, and then you're going to go on and explain here, why did you think this was unusual? What was kind of strange about what we read on this page? And then once you're done with that, make sure you go back and have all the sections on these 2 pages complete. And again, in order to get the full credit of 5 points, you really have to be thorough with your answers. If you just write 1 or 2 words down, you're going to not get any better than a 1 or a 3 on this. So make sure that you do your best and find text evidence to answer these, okay? All right, now, once you have finished that, we're going to do the same thing now on pages 136 and 137. And then we're just going to, again, do a little bit closer look in this story today on pages 136 and 137, which we have read. And if you need to, I would suggest rereading those 2 pages. Put this on pause, reread pages 136 and 137 before you complete your assignment today. But first, let's look at page 136. The 2 vocabulary words that we're looking at today is conduct. And to conduct means to organize or carry out an event or process. So sometimes in Read 180, when I conduct a class discussion, I make sure everybody is ready and paying attention and is ready to speak or contribute to the discussion themselves. So again, I want you to fill in, to conduct means to organize or carry out an event or process. And then what would be a good chance, or who would be a good chance to conduct an after-school book group? I want you to go ahead and fill in that example. Again, if you have to pause, please do so. I'm just going to keep recording. Proceed is your next word. Proceed, the definition is to come before something else. So you had years at the elementary school that preceded your years at Franklin Middle School. Okay? And then again, looking at the example, what is one action that might precede a good grade on a test? Go ahead and finish that. What do you think that you could put on that example? Okay, now what we're going to have you do is look at page 137. Now we're going to be really doing a little bit more of a close read on plot. So before we do that though, I'd make sure you answer the key idea. What happens when Mr. Summers arrives with the black box? You're going to have to go back probably into paragraph 4 and reread that portion. Okay. Now, when we look at analyzing plot, you're going to be again referring to pages 136, 137. How do the villagers respond to the arrival of the black box? What might tell you about the box? Okay. So again, the reason we're really looking at this is if we don't really stop to think about how the plot of this black box affects the characters and settings, this is probably going to be hard to understand the story and the events that follow this. So you need to go back into paragraph 4. And I will reread that if you would follow along. The lottery was conducted, as were the square dances of the Teenage Club, the Halloween program by Mr. Summers, who had time and energy to devote to civic activities. He was a round-faced, jovial man, and he ran the coal business, and people were sorry for him because he had no children and his wife was a scold. When he arrived in the square carrying the black wooden box, there was a murmur of conversation among the villagers, and he waved and called, "Little late today, folks." The postmaster, Mr. Graves, followed him carrying a three-legged stool, and the stool was put in the corner of the square, and Mr. Summers set the black box down on it. The villagers kept their distance, leaving a space between themselves and the stool, and when Mr. Summers said, "Some of you fellows want to give me a hand?" there was a hesitation before two men, Mr. Martin and his oldest son Baxter, came forward to hold the box steady on the stool while Mr. Summers stirred up the papers inside it. Okay. That should help you answer that question of analyzing plot. And the last thing you have to do on page 137, the directions say, reread paragraph 5. In what way might Mr. Summers talk of a new box to be part of the tradition of the lottery? So that I'm going to have you do on your own. You'll have to go back and reread paragraph 5 and then answer where the stretch section. Now this will be it for today. So again, what I'd like you to do on the pages 134 and 135, just take a picture of that. You could submit in Google Classroom. Once you're done with pages 136 and 137, please do the same. Again, each page is worth 5 points, so today's assignments that are submitted is going to be worth 20 points total. And then we will continue reading tomorrow. All right, have a good day, students. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach